Welcome to the Coaching Compass, where I talk to elite performance coaches about what it takes to build a career in high performance. Guest is Jack Birtwistle. Jack holds his master's in performance psychology and has built his career in professional rugby before making the move over to esports, where he is performance manager for Team Vitality's CS2 roster. Jack, thanks for making the time today. Why don't you tell everyone listening a little bit more about you?
Yeah, I mean, you covered most of it. Born and raised in Australia. Moved over to Edinburgh in 2018 to do my masters in performance psychology is what it was called. I'd previously worked in sports administration at the university level in Australia, and I think working with some of the student athletes there, it's not quite the same as what people in the States. I actually don't know what the university system in Canada is like. It's not quite collegiate athletes in America, but we had Commonwealth Games athletes, a lot of people in sport that wasn't professional. So fencing, badminton, rowing, people who had to really support themselves with their sport. And one of my roles was sort of helping them apply for grants, liaise with lecturers, tutors, the university to get time off for training, time off for events. And I think having done an undergraduate in psychology and not knowing what I wanted to do with it, sort of it more being an interest area, and then working with those athletes, I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to be involved in high performance, but support people in pursuing their goals and their aspirations. So that's what sort of inspired me to take time or leave my job, move overseas. Truthfully, I just wanted to travel and enjoy an overseas experience, something I hadn't done before. So my dad's English, had the passport, so I could come over to the UK, do my masters. After that, was lucky enough through some rugby connections back from my playing days, get an internship opportunity with a club in Ireland called Connacht. Did 2 seasons there with them before moving over to a bigger role with a club called Harlequins in London. And that was an interesting, those 2 experiences, I learned a lot. There were some ups and downs at both. High performance sport, well, I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about esport, but some of the challenges you face in esport, you still face in traditional sport. There's politics, there's culture, there's different organizational structures. No club is the same, so finding your way in different clubs is challenging. So those roles were far more mental performance specific, for sure. Coming into esport, I think you're a bit more of a jack of all trades. Different challenges, different opportunities. And then, I did, I think you and I must have connected on LinkedIn, and there was an opportunity to do some work ahead of the World Series of Warzone at the Red Bull Gaming Sphere in London. And I met some of the Adamus team there and got my first taste of esport and or professional esport. And from that opportunity came an opportunity to join or to interview with Team Vitality for their role. And I'm sure you remember, that for me was one of the scariest weeks. I've never experienced anxiety like that in my life. I was struggling to sleep because I thought, am I really going to leave rugby? Something I've had a passion for all my life. When I sat down and did my goal setting and, tried to map out how I wanted my career to go, it was going to the Rugby World Cup. It was working with the Australian national team. And so I was like, oh, am I really going to leave that and come to esport? But in the end, it's proven to be the best decision, career decision I've made. I got very lucky landing with this particular team, but it's worked out incredibly well.
You have to be lucky, but you also have to be good, and you've done some good work as well. Can't attribute it all to luck. Let's go back to your time in uni for a second. At what point, and maybe you knew as soon as you entered the program, but at what point did you know that mental performance coaching was what you wanted to do coming out of uni? Like, where did you come into the program knowing like that was your career trajectory, or were you just using it, like you said, as an excuse to travel and experience something new?
Um, I think, to be honest, like when I reflect on that period, so like I'll go back even further to my undergraduate. Like I did an undergraduate degree in Australia. It's quite common to do 2 degrees at once, and like instead of taking 3 years, you take 4 or 5, and you graduate with 2 different degrees. So I actually did psychology and a business degree. So I believe it or not, I have an accounting degree. Um, Although I can't do any accounting at all. And I remember my parents were like, "You can do the psychology, but you have to do something useful with it."
Useful. Yeah.
And
That's
you
great.
know, no one's ever gone broke doing an accounting degree, right? So they like, I did have a bit of parental pressure to do that, but the psychology for me was more of a personal interest space. Um, Very quickly, once I got into psychology, I was like, some of it I loved, some of it I hated. Of course, there's a lot of hard science in there, like the biology of the brain, um, the nervous system, all that stuff. Which a lot of it, honestly, I can't remember. Like, there's the hippocampus and the frontal lobe, but who knows, right? But the academic pathway, at least in Australia, is very geared towards either driving you towards further education, an honours degree, master's degree, PhD, or towards, and aligned with that is the clinical path, right? So a lot of people, I think, go into that thinking that's the career path, is I'm going to become a clinical psychologist, and I'm going to work with patients who need support on mental health issues. And I knew straight away I didn't want to do that. That was so for me. Like I wasn't really. I always wanted to work in sport, and I
Mm.
think when I reflect back on it, like the thing that attracted me to the the psychology originally was the sports element of it. Like, and that sort of, it's we're all human, so these principles, social psychology, team dynamics, like all of it applies to domains outside of sport as well, like organizational culture, like relationship dynamics within, romantic relationships, family dynamics. Developmental psychology applies to in primary school and secondary school as it does to an athlete developing skills. So I think for me, like what I realized quite a bit after completing it was like my interest in psychology was actually grounded a lot in like what makes a team work. Like how do you get these, whether it's a basketball team or a Counter-Strike team, 5 individuals playing well together, understanding each other. So I kind of partway through that degree was like, I never want to do psychology. Like that's not, it's because it's so heavily geared towards that clinical path or the research
Yes.
academic path, not so much towards practical applied psychology, and certainly not towards, I think a lot of people now would define performance psychology would be in the same bracket as positive psychology. Like just because there's nothing wrong doesn't mean you can't develop better skills. Just because uh, you're not depressed doesn't mean you can't level up. Like just for not for even performers, but everyday people doesn't mean you can't, level up your psychological well-being, your mental
Yes.
well-being, and enhance your life. So um, it took me a while after I finished that degree to realize I wanted to go back to it. And as I said before, when I introduced myself, like working with those athletes was one of those triggers or inspiration that brought me back. So yes, going over to Edinburgh, I definitely had a vision that I wanted to do this for a career rather than just an interest point of view, or to take a gap year. It was. I also remember, like I think sometimes I can be very self-reflective, both good and bad. I remember maybe the 18 months leading up to this, I wasn't myself especially happy. Like I remember, like at the time I was playing rugby and basketball in Australia for some reason. The basketball season is also in winter. So, I was Monday night, I'd have basketball training, Tuesday night, rugby training, Wednesday, thank goodness I had a night off. Thursday would be rugby training, then a basketball game, Friday night off, Saturday rugby game. And I remember thinking to myself one day, like, why am I doing all this? Like, I'm not going to make it as a pro in either sport. Like, I'm spending so much of my time doing, ultimately recreational activities, and I'm not moving myself forward. And at the time, it really got me down. I was like, I need to start being proactive, and things in my life need to move me forward. In retrospect, that was far too harsh of a perspective to take on that situation, but I definitely was like, yeah, I'm making a change. Like, I'm going to pursue this. I didn't know exactly how I was going to do the next step, and I think for me, and I'm sure a lot of people struggle with this as well, is like, I knew that step one was go and do my master's. I had no idea what step two was, but sometimes, like, not knowing what step two is, or not having certainty around what comes after the next thing, you sort of pause and go, well, maybe this will take me nowhere. And I had to sit back and say, like, just do it and figure it out next. Like, there's no point worrying about, like, you need to do some further education, and then you can start to worry about what you do next. So I definitely went over knowing that I didn't necessarily have a clear vision, and this is one of the real challenges with this career, is it's not like an engineer or a lawyer where you can join a firm and there's clear tiers or rungs, and you get experience, and almost, after a certain amount of time you get promoted by default, or at least you get, moved up by default at the beginning. At least there isn't that clear career path. So it is a bit, there's a lot of, you got to be really ready to deal with uncertainty and not know what's going to happen. And I still deal with that today, right? Like, if Vitalia decide to make some changes, I'd like to think that hopefully I'd be able to find another opportunity, but, like, it's not guaranteed. Whereas, if you're in a more stable career path, you're going to be able to find work for sure, assuming you don't do anything too ridiculous to end your current position. So, yeah, I definitely had a mission, but maybe not a clear visualized, route to what was going to come next.
Did you feel prepared for your first job with, I think you said it was Connaught Rugby, coming out of school? Were you ready? What was that like?
So it was a double-edged sword, right? Because I still remember the first day, like, sitting down and having a one-on-one. Like, day one I arrived. Now, bear in mind, I went over for a week. Like, the head coach invited me to come and experience the environment for a week. And I'm lucky. Like, I don't mind disclosing fully. Like, I had an aunt who unfortunately passed away, and she left me some money. So that gave me a bit more financial flexibility. So I was already in the UK, but I was able to, pay for my own flights and accommodation to go over and spend a week with this team out of my own pocket. Not everyone has that luxury. So I had some savings from my previous job, and I had a small amount there that, I was privileged that, that was my aunt gave me that opportunity to pursue this. It helped me pay for my master's degree as well.
Yeah.
So, that is a big caveat. Not everyone has that, but that I was able to go and spend a week with the team. But once they invited me to join them, it was essentially on an internship basis. There was small help around, like, they fed me, which was great because they fed the players like they fed me. But, I had to pay my accommodation, and it was COVID time, so my living costs were virtually zero. But I was earning very, very little money. And I think that actually helped, because if they're not really paying you, then how much can they expect from you? So there was a little bit of freedom around that, to be like, I'm here to learn, right? I'm growing in this role. They're giving me this opportunity, and I'm repaying that with my time and effort. But yeah, I remember the first day, like, I had two conversations with two players that had represented Ireland. And at that particular time, Ireland was, I mean, they're still one of the best teams in the world, but they were, beating the All Blacks, playing at a really high level. So I was like, whoa, how the hell did I end up in this situation?
It's cool.
And like, I did a lot of prep work before that. So I had some, and I had connected with a man named Aaron Walsh. I'd connected with obviously down the track I connected with you, but I spent a lot of time networking and borrowing resources from people. You have your templates on like what does an initial conversation with an athlete look like, and you can work through those worksheets. You can work through those templates, and so you can stumble your way through it to begin with, and you're going to be nervous. It's going to be awkward. I would, yeah, in a sense, of course, I was really, really lucky to do this with a professional outfit straight away. But, I think others can absolutely do it with local teams, and that's, if you live in an area that has a professional football team, even if like we talk the UK, even if it's it doesn't have to be Premier League or Championship, there's League One, League Two, League Three, like, finding a way to get a foot in the door and then offering up that time and building that experience. It's unfortunate, but it's the reality that I think the industry is at the moment. Is there's so few jobs at the top level, and they're mostly looking for people with experience. So you've got to find a way to build your network and build connections from the beginning. But it's a long-winded way to say, like, in a sense, I felt prepared. I didn't have too much pressure on myself because, if they bring you in and you're getting paid a decent salary to do this job, then there's expectation that you deliver at a high level. Whereas I think the expectation around me was much more like, thank you for helping us out. Whatever you can offer is useful to us.
Mm-hmm. I think networking will be a theme in every episode, but I have to ask. So you talked about Aaron Walsh and kind of how you're always looking to network. What strategies or mediums, or how have you found networking to work for you? Do you go to live events and network there? Are you doing it all on social media? What's worked for you?
I think I've done most of it online, to be honest, and a big part of that was there was COVID time, which obviously everything was online, but also because the nature of this industry is that there might only be three of you doing. I don't know, like there's probably a couple dozen here in London. It's a big city, but there's not necessarily going to be that many performance coaches. If your preferred sport is rugby, like there's only 10 professional teams in the country, so you know number one, my uncle gave me this outstanding advice long time ago with networking, and it's number one, you never ask for a job. You always ask for just 5-10 minutes of someone's time, and usually you get more. People are happy to give you half an hour, even up to an hour, depending on their schedule. But ask for a small commitment, and at the end of every conversation, ask them if they have two people that they can recommend that you talk to, and you get that exponential growth. Because if someone comes to me and asks for two people and I give them two people and they get two, it just grows and grows and grows. And not everyone's going to give you time, but you've got to kind of take a scattergun approach and approach as many people as possible. But like, I've had conversations with, before I don't even know if I'd say I'm established now, but back in the day, like people working in MLB teams in America, people working in NFL teams, people working at IMG Academy, like you might think that these people are out of reach, and maybe it's the industry, because it's performance psychology. Like, these people naturally want to help. They're naturally inclined to have a chat, like to talk about this stuff. You're probably not going to get Pep Guardiola on the phone, but you never know that the who's the performance coach for, can you list the performance coaches for the Premier League teams? Like, I don't think people, like, they're not celebrities, right? So most of them are more than happy to give time. LinkedIn's a great place to go. Often you can go on websites for sports teams where might have listed emails and stuff. It takes time, but it's absolutely possible.
Thanks for sharing. So you started with Connaught and you started in an internship kind of scenario. When did you make the full step? Was that still with the same club, to from like internship to like full-time paid, or was that then with Harlequins that you did that? And how was that transition? Because then you're going from, okay, there's no pressure on me, I can kind of do what I can, to, okay, now I'm like required to and expected to have an impact. How did you handle that transition?
Yeah, I think so. It was when I switched from Connacht to Harlequins. It was I wanted to stay at Connacht. Like I love the players, I love the culture there. The club really appealed to me. Like it's there's 4 provinces in Ireland, and Connacht are historically the little brother of the 4. They have won one premiership, which is incredible considering the resources they have. Like the in Ireland, like Leinster are basically the Irish team, right? And they have a centralized system, and everything's managed to direct resources towards the international team performing well. So, there's been a few great players that have come through Connacht's academy system and then been moved to other clubs where the national system believes that they can benefit from playing with their other centre partner or playing in a front row with an all Irish front row. So it was definitely like a chip on the shoulder, something to prove. But it also, the reality was that we weren't as strong. So, there wasn't the same performance pressure because there wasn't the same expectation. But I wanted to stay there. I loved the boys. I loved like the head coach there, Andy Friend, was fantastic. I owe him a lot. He's a superb human being. And when the opportunity to join Harlequins came, like we had a conversation. He basically said, like, mate, just go for it because I don't think we can give you the same opportunity. Certainly not financially. So it was bittersweet because I didn't want to leave. But for my career, it was the right choice. But it certainly taught me a lesson moving across in terms of how important the people you work with are to your work, and how important the structure and club culture and environment are to your work. So, I went from being, an intern, virtually not being paid, but being included in like all the, Friendy, the coach would, when we do our, I can't remember what they were called, but like the or individual development plans, the IDPs, like he was like, we need to, the strength and conditioning coach does a report on every player on their strength and conditioning. The rugby coaches do a report on every player on their rugby stuff. And he said, like, I want you to be involved in this and I want you to give feedback to every player. And, so he really involved me, leading into team meetings. He would ask me, like, how do you think I could frame this? Like, how should we go about positioning this challenge this week? Whereas when I moved to Harlequins, it was much more protected space. Like, okay, you'll work with the players one-on-one. Everything that happens relating to the game and to the team sits with the coaches. It sits with the general manager. There wasn't that avenue for contribution in the same way, which is fine. This is something I've spoken with, but it's quite common. Like, if a coach values you and you have a good relationship, you'll be really heavily utilized. If they don't, then you won't necessarily be. So I think that's typical. You've either got like a heavily integrated model or structure, or you're a support service on the side. And it's not. Yeah. It's not to say that one is right and one. Well, I mean, I have my own opinion, but you can still do good work in a support structure. you still meet with the players, you still develop their mental development plans, and you try and develop the tools for them and strategies. You help them through adversity, whatnot. But in terms of contributing to shaping team culture, contributing to shaping how we want to, what are the mental challenges we're going to face in this upcoming match, and what are the strategies we're going to use to overcome them. I found at Harlequins I had far less avenues to be involved in that. And then equally, it did come with a lot more pressure. How are you contributing to winning on the weekend? And there was at times some tension there around is working with an injured player who's not coming back for 6 months but is struggling with their injury rehabilitation valuable to the club? Well, it's not going to have a direct impact on winning this current weekend. It's working with an academy player who's outside of selection at the moment. Doesn't have an impact on this weekend, but it might have an impact in 3 years' time. So there was at times a lot of pressure to show how are you impacting week to week. But also for me, and I mean, it's a couple of years down the track now, I don't really care anymore. I often felt there wasn't clear expectations, or that a lot of people don't know what they want you to do. So it's like if I had a magic button that I could press that meant we won, I would press it. But if that was the case, I'd go and work for, I don't know, the New York Yankees or the New York Knicks, and I'd make a lot more money, and I'd have a huge public profile, and life would be great, right? So
yes,
it's not how high performance works. So I went from one environment where I had a really good relationship with the head coach, was fully integrated, but not really getting paid, to another environment where I'm now earning a good salary, but I'm mostly working with players one-to-one, and there was more pressure and expectation, like, hey, we're paying you this. Can you show me? And it's like, but guys, that's not how it works. I can't, a strength and conditioning coach can go, well, we got this guy in the gym for 6 weeks and his squat went up 20%, this went up 10%, whatever. I can't show you that how this player's developed in a micro sense. In a macro you can, but of course it doesn't mean that a goal kicker is never going to miss a kick. So are they feeling more confident about their kicking process and they're self-reporting that? Great. But does that carry any weight within the environment? Sometimes, but not always.
Yeah, measuring impact as a sports psychologist, tricky business.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jack, we need to touch on esports here. So obviously CS2 athletes are not rugby players. Different lifestyles, different relationship to pressure, all of that jazz. What that you brought from sport and traditional sport, what frameworks did you bring in that you got wrong when you tried to apply them in an esports setting? What were some of the early lessons you learned there?
Yeah, so whether it's because the development pathway for most pro gamers is so self-driven, you play the game, obviously you might have people that you play with regularly, but more or less you're playing a team game as an individual. You grind the game for hours, you find out you're good at it, you decide you want to go pro. Like in a traditional sport, you're probably in the academy from 14 years old. You're being educated on how to be coached, how to work in the gym, how to manage your nutrition, how to manage your sleep. And don't get me wrong, a lot of players still get that wrong, and they're players who have terrible habits that are just bigger, right? And they progress through the development pathway because of a natural gift or because of talent alone rather than their professionalism. But for the most part, when you get to that professional level, there's a high degree of adherence to program, right? Like most 18, 19, 20-year-olds entering in will do as they're told, right?
Yes.
This is not the case in esport. And everyone I've spoken to has the same challenge, right? So everything you bring to the table will get challenged. You'll get pushback on it. There'll be a question like, why are we doing it? How's this going to benefit me? There is definitely like you still have guys that are like, I'm interested in high performance. I see this as a high performance domain. I want to optimize my life and my lifestyle to get better at this. And those guys are a dream to work with. Like they will eat up all the questions you have. They'll eat up all the work you give them. They'll answer any questions. They'll constantly be looking for an edge. But it's not necessarily the norm. The team I work with, like, coming in, we've got a player who's been, is now like a 7-time best player in the world. He's got more MVPs than anybody else by, 50% now. We got the IGL with the most trophies won. So these guys also have this sense of, I've been successful. So what is there to add? But you get that in traditional sport as well. Dealing with a 19, 20-year-old academy kid is very different to dealing with a guy that's played for their country 100 times. Some of them, no one's rude. Some of them are like, oh, I'm good. I'm sorted. I don't need it. Others are like, yeah, like I want to learn. Like I can still learn something from everybody. So everyone's got a slightly different personal disposition, but like that adherence is like you come in and you go, okay, guys, this is going to be a daily check-in, 5 minutes. Let's just like quickly reflect on where we are. No, it's just schoolwork. I don't want to do it. So you quickly learn that it's like, okay, you really need to meet these guys where they are. You need to get creative. How can I take these principles that I want to develop and implement and make them digestible for these individuals? And one of the benefits of working with an esport team is you've got, like, I've got 5 players. I don't need to worry about 40 different guys. You can go a bit more individualized and a bit more bespoke for how these guys are going to, how you can develop these skills. You can really get a bit more creative.
You obviously are still young and at the start of your career in many ways, although I would say you've had a lot of success in your career to date. If you could boil down what has made you successful to date to one or two main things or habits or routines or practices, whatever it might be, what would you say?
I think like a philosophical perspective is, like, as I said, meet the players where they are. Really get flexible with it. I think a lot of young coaches come in and want to, they've finished their university degree and they've got, pre-performance templates, visualization like PetLep, right? Like if you don't get a player to follow PetLep perfectly, it's okay.
Right.
They can pick up on different steps. They don't need to do it in their, sitting down at their PC. They can do it lying in their bed, right? Like there's different. You've got to be adaptable. You've got to meet them where they are. Relationships are critical, especially CS is very particular because we travel so much. You're together 10 hours a day when you're on the road. And you're constantly playing, like you've got games all the time. So building those relationships where you can build trust is really important. So that's like one of the first things to do is focus on connecting individually with the people, and not in a professional sense, in a like in a personal sense. Can you have a good personal relationship with these guys? That's critical for your survival in CS, I think, as well as then being able to do the work. In terms of like my practices and my habits, like this is something, I know you and I have talked about it in the past. Like I struggle with this. I hate when people self-diagnose with ADD, but it's the environment's so dynamic. You can find yourself losing your own structure quite a bit. Something that's actually been really good for me more recently is I've started using Notion, which I've resisted for a long time, but I fired up ChatGPT and got it to teach me how to actually use it properly and set it up. And it's been huge for me in terms of keeping track of where each player is, what tasks I need them to do or want them to do, what levels of support they need at what times. So being organized yourself is really good because it's very easy to sort of find yourself feeling like you're a spinning top going around in circles and not really moving forward. Um, but it's like a lot of reflection, a lot of like taking time to like write notes. Like again, like I've loved the advent of AI because I've got, you know, I can sit down and journal into it, and it's sort of like a brainstorming partner, which especially in esport you don't have.
Mm,
Well, I mean, it's the same
yeah.
in a lot. Like you don't have like in traditional sport, there might be 5 or 6 coaches in a rugby team, for example, maybe even 7 or 8, and they sit down and have a coaches meeting and they bounce ideas off each other. And you can do that with your coaching staff to a degree, but like you're going to come across a lot of challenges. You're going to come across a lot of moments where you're like, I'm really not sure how to go about this. And taking time to self reflect, to journal on it is really important. You know, I have to keep reminding myself, like, there's so many resources online, whether it's, books, online resources, templates, things you can use. So for me, like taking that time to identify like what's the key performance challenge here, and then taking the time to research how can I solve this performance challenge for this player. You don't need to have all the solutions all at one time. You can go back and do your research for sure. I had something else I was going to say, but it slipped my mind. Oh, the other thing like that is great about esport is I think the team will look to you to lead on team culture, and getting that framework right at the beginning it gives you like a lens through which you can address everything. You know, you can sit down with a player and say, "How are we being team first at the moment? This is a value we agreed upon," and then that opens up a conversation around how they're feeling about their role in the team. You know, okay, maybe they're not being team first, but then why not? Well, what's preventing you from being team first? So they now understand the work, if that makes sense. So
Yes.
they now know, okay, this is what we've agreed to, these principles as a team. We understand why they're important. It doesn't mean that people are going to be perfect, but now you've got these rocks to go back to, like, you know, the captain was upset at you and you didn't like the way that conflict unfolded, but we agreed that everyone, like, it was, no effort required or no talent required to turn up knowing all the strats. You didn't know the strats. So how do you want to solve this problem? Because maybe he could have dealt with that problem better, but how could you deal with that problem better? We agreed that do your job is one of your values. So
Yes.
did you do your job there? You know, so helping that has been massive for helping me connect the mental skills back to like the reality of being in the team.
Bring it back to the bigger picture and not just the silo of sports psychology.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Jack, this has been great, and I feel like we might need a follow up chat about Notion and some of the inner workings of how you work and use some of the tools you do. But I really appreciate you being on. Um, for those listening, if you want to go further in what we've covered here today with Jack, we're bringing Jack in for an exclusive session inside Advantage, which is our community for performance coaches. It's a small group, it's an intimate setting, and it's a conversation that you won't be able to have with Jack anywhere else unless you're going to a CS tournament one of these days. Jack will be joining us May 25th. Spots are limited, so if you're interested, there's a link in the show notes, and feel free to apply to join there. But Jack, yeah, grateful to you and sharing your insights here, and good luck in your next event. So where are you off to next?
We go to Rio on Friday,
There you go.
so it'll be
Well,
nice weather.
nice. Well, enjoy Rio, and thank you, sir. We'll talk again soon.
Pleasure, mate. Thank you for your time.
Cheers.